This is the part that when people are wondering what I'm waiting for. You got to make sure it's muted. And that's it. We are live on Triple T, episode number 171 on April 8th, 2025. Welcome, everybody. And no, you're not seeing things. I actually have people behind me. These are actually real human beings. You may recognize my buddy Mo and from Canada and his beautiful fiance, Patty Lou. And welcome to Triple T. For those of you that are watching live on YouTube, hi, Mom. Should be here. And as long as we're talking about YouTube, please do all the wonderful YouTube things that don't cost you anything but help me out. Click the subscribe button, ring the bell, leave comments, then comment on other people's comments. And if you hear something you don't like and you want to comment about it, go to somebody else's profile and feel free to comment on that. What else? I've got a website, thetswb.com. That's right, thetallskinnywhiteboy.com. That's what it stands for. It has stood for that since the early 70s. So there. And on the website, we're still doing upgrades because we can. So if it's been a minute since you've been on the website, please feel free to drop in and play Where's Waldo and see if you can find the changes. And if there's anything that you think I should add to it, please get a hold of me. I also offer a free, that's right, no charge to you, consultation, 30 minutes of my time for you to bend my ear and chit chat and see if there's something that I can help you with. I get the privilege of helping people with all sorts of interesting stuff: anxiety, depression, PTSD, phobias, grief. I work with clients from, it all depends. Just get a hold of me and call. I get to help athletes from beginner all the way up to pro level. I offer corporate coaching. I've got a lot of classes available for a number of different things. Yes, I'm that kind of person. Just working now on the syllabus, reworking the syllabus for EMT and first responders and law enforcement. So if you know anybody in those fields, please first thank them and then let them know that I would like to help them out. And I do offer a discount for our amazing military and law enforcement and first responders. What else we got? Time to introduce the tie of the week. One of my favorites, golden oldie. See if you guys recognize any of these fine characters on here. And if you identify with
that
one or
one.
more,
That's so cute.
Some days I identify as Pooh. Oftentimes I identify as T.I. double G. Because everybody needs a Tigger. What else? For those of you that are watching for the very first time, thank you so much. And if you're watching the recording, the way Triple T works is the first hour, we go for 2 hours. First hour, I've got 3 topics I do my best to get through. Second hour is open mic, open platform. Anybody on the call can ask a question or bring up a topic. And then I let all the people on the call answer first because I like to learn as well. And if I feel that there's anything else I can add after everybody else has answered, that's when I offer up my what? My 2 centavos. That's right, yeah. But I also like to start it out with, tell me something good. Who's got something to share from the last 7 days from the last time we saw each other? Anybody? 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 Well, fine, I do. These two have been visiting from Canada, hanging out on the property, and we've been having fun and running the smoker like a restaurant and eating good and yes. Place is always welcome for guests, so y'all can come on down and have a visit on Casa de TNT. Anybody else got anything they want to share from the week?
Will pop in. I actually started, I think I told you all, my book's upstairs, Reality Transurfing, which was really, really helpful. And I'm finding a lot of common threads between that and Joe Dispenza's work. So in case anybody has any insights about Joe Dispenza and what their expertise is, he didn't resonate with me until I was on a 2-hour drive and I decided to listen to one of his audios. So it was very interesting. Any insight?
Divine intervention.
Very
Can I
true.
say something if you
Oh,
don't mind, TJ?
Yeah.
TJ comes across as funny, and so does Morris. I know some people call him Mo, but I call him Morris. But I just want you to know that out of all of the people I've ever met, these two, I told them this the other day, but I said, please put your egos aside for 2 seconds. They are so brilliant and so spiritually evolved. And we've all been connected on a very divine level, I would say. And I just want to really give both of these guys credit. TJ's brave enough to come on every week. Morris is still in the closet, spiritual closet. And I'm trying very hard to get him out.
Hey.
So I just want to say I'm really happy to be here, and TJ and his wife Tina are absolutely just two beautiful souls, and I'm just really, really privileged to be here.
Aw,
That's awesome.
checks in the mail. Appreciate it. No, you two are just like being on the call. All you got to do is let me know you want to say something, and the mic's open.
Right on. I'll put up my hand.
Anybody else got anything to share from the last week? Yes, no, maybe so. Well, looks like it's time for tonight's topics. I got to research Johnny Carson when he was doing, maybe I'd get that hat or something he used to wear. Tonight's topics: erasing teachers, fences, and goats. Kicking it off, erasing teachers. Who had that teacher back in the day when okay, I'm gonna age myself here. Does anybody remember chalkboards? And remember the erasers, and remember when the teacher was up there making all that dust, and you sometimes wish you could have just erased the teacher while you were at it, like erase, erase, erase. This topic came up, of course, as many of them do, with one of my clients, and challenges of being careful when dealing with the past as to how much of the past you want to bring forward. And when it's time you decide that you've had enough of the past, you're done living in the past, how do you separate the lessons from the event to make sure that you don't erase all of it? Because if you erase all of it, the subconscious will freak out because, of course, it's trying to protect you and it wants to make sure that you don't make the same mistake. And that's why the subconscious is what we're going to call an overachiever sometimes. Yes, your lesson is the size of a golf ball, but we're going to pack it in a 50-gallon garbage bag with all the schmutz that came with that event. And you're going to carry that around for the rest of your life because that golf ball is very precious. You paid for it. I know, I was there. The other side of this is, especially in the dating realm, for those of you that were lucky enough to meet your perfect person when you were like 8, and you got married when you were like 17, and they were wonderful the entire time, awesome. You are proof that unicorns do exist on this planet. For the rest of us who may have dated a number of times and collected a little baggage from each of them along the way, there are certain ways that you can look at what they were. And of course, there's labels.
Oh, he was such a narcissist, and oh, that one was a gaslighter, and he was just an absolute a-hole, and da 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 da.
Or were they teachers? What did you learn not only about them and about humans in their natural environment, but about yourself? One of the things that I've noticed about some of my triple P clients for the perfect partner protocol, not the perfect person protocol, is the ones that have been through, we're just going to say a nice number of relationships. It's much easier for them to journal what they're looking for and what they're not looking for. And so one of my recent clients who basically has graduated triple P had somebody show up in their life that they'd known for a while. And this person came out of the blue and like, oh, but I've had feelings for you for so long. And they were having challenges trying to figure out what they should do. Long story short, they decided to give it a go because the person has always been a pretty decent person. But as soon as they got together, they were able to see behind the public and friendship masks. And things went south pretty quick. And to their credit, they were able to step back and analyze without all the emotional feelings and baggage and everything involved. They pulled out their journal, read through it, looked at all the stuff, and it kept them grounded to where they were able to look at this person that they've known for quite a long time, from a distance as a friendship for quite a long time. But now up close and personal, things popped out that they were like, deal breaker. And they called it off. The other person, of course, had a bit of a tiff, a reaction. There's a couple of labels that person could probably fit under, and they tried to use a couple of manipulation tactics, shall we say. And my client was able to recognize exactly what they were doing because of the teachers from their past. They also recognized that their recovery was much quicker. And they were able to make the recovery without all the extra energetic baggage of, they said this and they did that. All right. Which they admitted normally would have taken about a minimum of 2 to 3 weeks for them to recover. And this time it was 2 to 3 days. And when I asked him, are you more upset at finding out who they really were? Or were you more upset about losing the Hallmark movie that was being created for the future? And they recognized it was both. And they were able to accept both much easier because of past teachers and the training that they got. And there was one part that was bothering them a bit, and while we were doing the session, they realized that the part that was bothering them was simply leftover residue from a family member when they were young. And the best part about it was they went, there it is. That makes sense. Now I can latch on to the lesson, forgive the person who gave me the lesson the way they did, and let go of the energetic schmutz. And so I wanted to bring this up simply because we're learning stuff daily. Unless you're in a coma or living under a rock, any interaction with, I don't care if it's social media, television, hopefully not the news, but yes, the news, humans in their natural environment, we are all being exposed to some form of a teacher, some form of lesson, whether we know it or not. It sets us up for reactions to things in the future, to, again, dealing with humans in their natural environment. And we have to be careful not to be so quick to want to erase all of the memory of what happened. I had heard of I believe it was a Jim Carrey movie, where, if I remember right, and if somebody knows the movie I'm talking about, you can elaborate on it. But he had gone through a horrific breakup and he wanted to completely forget this person. And he was lucky enough or unlucky enough to find somebody that could just go in and kapow, you're done. You don't remember this person at all, the time you spent, all the above. And then he ran into the person again. And he was, that could be, the spotless mind, could be. And am I correct that he met this person again and found he was still attracted to them, but because the event had basically been erased, he didn't understand or no longer had the lesson. The lesson had been erased as well. And what was coming down the track? Round 2. And so again, Oh, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. I've heard of that one. I should watch that. I've heard is it a good show?
Kate Winslet is the co-star, and I believe it is. And what's funny is I'm like going through the catalog up here, and I could not remember it. So I'm glad somebody put it in because that was one of like I don't know the million that he's made that I didn't see.
Yeah. You know that movie that he was in? Okay, that cuts it down to what, 500? Okay. Yeah, pretty close. My sister used to pull that on me. You know that one girl? I'm like, could be. Cuts it down to quite a number. Well, she was wearing blue jeans. I'm like, okay, you narrowed it down by 10%. So, off track, squirrel. For those of you watching for the first time, this is the disclaimer for Triple T. Yes, we do chase squirrels here. My squirrels know squirrels who have squirrels who also chase squirrels. So, welcome for the ride. Any input, ahas, epiphanies, anything you guys want to add? Yes, Holly.
Gosh, this is once again me talking to me as usual, but man, so many downloads from this. One of the downloads I got, interestingly, because for those who don't know, I actually was a substitute school teacher for a couple years. And so as soon as we started talking about teachers, I'm like, oh yeah, I've been the teacher. And I kind of had this interesting thought of, I think this applies to, everything we learn. Because my first thought was when I became a teacher, it also taught me new things about all the things that I thought I knew about my school experiences. Being on that other side gives you this completely different perspective. Mm-hmm. And so one of my first thoughts in this whole thing is how many times have I passed up the opportunity to learn more lessons from what happened because I didn't take that moment to kind of stand above it. We do maybe chair therapy would be a good example of it. And just, even see the world through the eyes of the other person. And I was thinking about, because sometimes it's like, we might be thinking, well, what if the other person's a horrible human being? But even that, I had an experience with someone a couple weeks ago where we were talking about something that happened to them. And when they looked through the eyes of the other person, what they learned was that what the other person did wasn't reasonable. And even that's a good lesson. Because they've been going through their whole life thinking they were this horrible person and the other person who was condemning them was right to condemn them. And as soon as they stepped in the other shoes, it was like, I'd never say that to another human being. That's a nasty thing to say to somebody. So, yeah. Another thing, just kind of throwing this out there too, is we talk about, the list can help keep you grounded. I'm starting to work on this. I'm still in early stages too, but also figuring out a few of your non-negotiables, but also figuring out a way early on to test if those non-negotiables are there. Mm-hmm. Because that way you could test it before you've caught up in the emotion and before you've caught up into, and we say the emotion and we think it's, oh, I'm so much in love with them, but often it's how they make us feel. Yes. They know just the right thing to say. I'm going to make you, you're self-conscious about your intelligence. I'm going to make you feel smart. You're self-conscious about your appearance. I'm going to make you feel beautiful. And you get so caught up in that now you're in the trance and you can't see it. But if you catch it right up front before you're solidly in it and you already have that list of, I check and see, do you respect my boundaries? I check and, maybe test the small things and, then you don't even have to get into the deeper. That doesn't mean we won't ever get there. Not saying that, but I think the value of having your most important non-negotiables and having quick ways to say, how does this manifest? And how does this not manifest? Could be very valuable too.
Yes. Absolutely spot on. And that's why I find it so ironic that my Triple P clients seem to have a pretty common phenomena. They get started and I tell them to do the 3 journals and Triple P, the perfect partner protocol. And I have them do 3 journals, one for their person, one for their tribe, and one for their streams of income. And when I bring that up, they're like,
Oh my gosh, I didn't know I was going to have to do homework. And in a year, I thought I came here to meet somebody, and you're telling me I got to wait a whole year. Oh my gosh.
I'm like, just relax, chill. It happens every time. And as they start their person journal, the reason it's a year that they're not supposed to be in a committed relationship is as they go through the journal and clearing and cleaning their energy and all this stuff, what happens? Lo and behold, about 3 months into it, to my lack of shock and dismay, I met the perfect person. Oh my gosh. I'm like, sure you did. Yeah, I'm sure they're perfect. And about 3-4 weeks later, they're, oh my gosh, they were terrible. I gotta do that. I'm like, yeah, I know. Okay, let's gather up the lessons. What'd you learn? What was it? What got reflected? What'd you see in yourself? Where'd that come from? How old's this energy? We clean that up. And then what happens right after we clean up those lessons from all the schmutz? Oh my gosh, I met the perfect person. Oh, they're amazing. I'm like, yeah, I know. Kind of like, they're the best person you've ever met, ... so far. And usually by about month 10, when they've got about 2 months to go, after 2 to 3 perfect people, they're like, I'm never dating. I'm happy with myself. I'm not dating. I'm done. This is it. I've had enough. No mas. And I'm like, you've graduated. Get ready, because now people are going to approach you more than ever before. But congratulations. In 2 months, you'll have graduated, and you'll be able to look at them and go, what are your credentials? And you've been able to figure out how to rescue all the lessons, forgive the teachers, leave the schmutz behind, and start meeting people for activities instead of filling a spot. Mark.
Yeah, I got a squirrel that jumped in about homework.
Squirrel.
And when I'm working with, teens, I explain to them about homework. I say that it's not the teacher's attempt to torture you by remote control. And this applies with the topic, because when you learn something like the power of journaling, and then you practice it, you're telling your brain, hey, this is important. So you're much more likely to remember it. And that's the purpose of, why teachers assign homework. It's not to torture not to torture the poor student by remote control. It's a way that the brain actually remembers stuff, because you're telling it, hey, this is important. So you're much more likely to get that thrown into long-term memory. And that's why homework is important. Now, I do disagree that, like I said, teachers have been assigning homework for thousands upon thousands of years. In fact, when they dug up the ruins of Babylon, they found a classroom and they found a bin in the corner, and it all had, little clay tablets of the Code of Hammurabi, and it was homework that they had assigned. The teacher had assigned, and so I've been using the same technology for like 6,000 years. We've come up with a few better ways since then, but teachers rely on the tried and true of homework to, get people to, get the students to remember. That's why we assign homework. We do.
I had a great little suggestion that was, I don't remember, I wish I could remember where I got it from though. I don't call it homework anymore. I call it recommendations. I've got some recommendations for some stuff that you can do on your own. Because I still have a traumatic little child who is 13 years old, 7th grade, who had already completed 10th grade English and math, right, Mom? And they put me back into 7th grade and made me do homework, and my grades went from A++ to C- because I got straight A's on my tests and straight F's on my homework because I'd already found something that I wanted to do as soon as I got home. And I did it until the dinner bell, which of course back in those days was the street lights, came on, and I would come home, eat, and go to bed. So, but I'm over it now. Much better, right, Mom? Lenora.
Any day we're getting over the homework situation, clearly. I like the idea of changing it, and I follow the whole entire concept with homework, but I do find that people do turn away from that word. So that has actually resonated with me quite a bit. When it comes to teachers, and I like the idea of seeing everything as a lesson, which I can understand for some people it might be exhausting, but for me, it was really helpful when I heard this concept of everyone is a teacher. They're teaching you how more of what you want to be, and they're also teaching you how you don't want to be. Because especially if you interact with narcissists or people that might be a little more challenging for you, and you would think, I would never say that to somebody. I would never even get those words out of my mouth, let alone in my head. They're teaching you. They're teaching you more about yourself. And when you can recognize that that is a quality, that is a characteristic that you carry about yourself, that self-awareness, that recognition, that shame and guilt and manipulation are not in my wheelhouse of ways to get things across to people or to ways to help people learn. I found that to be really impactful because then you really get this disconnect that says, thank you so much for teaching me how I don't want to be. And that I found to be really, really helpful.
And when you also add to that, that people are put into your life for a reason, a season, or a lesson. And yeah, well,
One of the things that people get stuck on a lot, they see it as homework, but it's not really homework. It's the same lesson repeating and repeating and repeating, especially for people who have been getting up there in years and dated a lot of people over the years. They tend to sort for the same people over and over and over again, and then wonder why they didn't get a different result. So it's not really homework. It's sitting down and studying the lessons and learning them so you can move on to the next phase.
the reason that's so important is the reason why I came up with the Triple P protocol in the first place, because I may or may not have been through a few relationships in my time.
Well, two.
And there came a point where one day I went, man, I've been with some amazing women. What went wrong? What was the common denominator? Oh. And I realized that I needed to do some work on moi. And in doing that, I came up with the Triple P protocol, which is how I met my beautiful, lovely wife. So I decided to share it with the world, and it seems to be working quite well. So, Holly.
This conversation about homework, I got to chime in on this one too. So for those who don't know, there's actually been studies done on homework, and they've shown that too much homework can actually be negative to your learning. So not only is it not zero, not only does it not help, it actually hurts it. And I look back at my life. So I had a teacher that put it really well. So I guess I'll give the background. First of all, I had homework. I was terrible at it. When I did do it, it didn't help me for years and years and years. But then I hit a few AP courses. And because the point of the course was to pass the test at the end of the year, we had a goal in mind. We had where we were going. Teachers couldn't waste our time with busy work, which for me is like the definition of homework up to that point is busy work.
Yes.
But all of a sudden it was all targeted and it was important, and every single thing we were asked to do had a purpose behind it. And all of a sudden I could see the purpose, and I was actually learning stuff from it, and it was useful, and it was time tested. And but I really like the way my Excel teacher once put it, that when you have somebody who's giving you targeted shortcuts, that's what they're sending you home to learn, are the targeted shortcuts. That you could do the work or not do the work. It's up to you. But you can either do the work the hard way or the easy way. And the way that seems hard is always easy. And the way that seems easy is always hard, because it depends on if you're willing to put in the effort up front to get the payoff later. You'll still get there either way. It doesn't matter. As he said, it doesn't matter to me. But just know you can either do it the hard way by just, skipping over all these shortcuts I'm giving you and not learning them. And you can learn it yourself. He had something about, carrying it on your shoulders, doing the hard work. Or you could take these shortcuts and do it a lot faster. Just it might take a little extra work up front. So don't do busy work that's assigned just for the sake of assigning it. But if you're ever given shortcuts, definitely take advantage.
Awesome. And I'm so glad you brought that up. And one of my squirrels jumped over and had the big sign that said, what are the 3 most expensive words when people are trying to teach you anything? I know you guys have heard this 100 times. What was that? I know that. Yes, it doesn't matter if it's been taught to you 48 times. One other squirrel came by and said, there are 2 types of teachers. There are babysitters and there are actual teachers. One is there to make sure that you're in place doing something. The other one is there for inspiration to help you along to a better life. And I've had both. And I remember some of my most inspiring ones. I think if we think back, we'll always have that one favorite teacher or 2 that stood out. And they're the ones that, we don't ever want to erase. Mark.
Yeah, my sister was a teacher for 37 years in the Boston school system. And when she was teaching these 5th graders, again, low economic, depressed area, and she assigned homework. And, she'd stand at the door the next day, and if they didn't have their homework, from the very first day, she would give them a book, she'd give them a pencil, and you're out in the hallway and raising the bar, kind of what Holly was shooting at. And she said that, the first, couple of days, there'd be 10 or more kids out in the hallway because they didn't have their homework. And she said, you don't have a seat in here unless you have your homework. By the end of the first week, there was nobody in the hallway because they knew that the only way they were getting in that classroom was to have their homework done. So she set the bar really high for them. And they, kids will always, up their game to the level of, what's expected. So she, and parents used to, have fights to get their child into Mrs. Donegan's class. So.
Right on. Love hearing that stuff.
So in that vein, I think it would be really important to understand when you're dealing with a teacher or your homework or anything like that, is it a push or a pull that is being created in that class? Because that will change, and that will make a huge difference as far as how people participate in that and the value that they get out of it.
Yes. Exactly. And one of the other things I think that is a really good teacher is the ability to recognize, are they a fish or are they a monkey? Because you can't judge a fish because it can't climb a tree. and you can't judge a monkey because it can't hold its breath underwater. And I think too many, I've had a couple of teachers in the past that judged everybody's a fish. If you're in here, you're a fish. And they couldn't understand why certain students just weren't excelling.
Well, Billy gets it.
Billy's a damn fish. Want me to get you a coconut? I'll get you a coconut. Have Billy get you a coconut. Billy can't climb a tree. Well, we ain't got room for monkeys in here. I don't know how to deal with monkeys. Well, then I don't know what to do with you. Mark.
Another squirrel. My sister used to tell all her kids, everybody's 100%. You might be good at math. You may be lousy in sports. You might be good at sports. You might not be good in English. But when you add up this totality of a human being, it always adds up to 100%.
There. Yes. 100, exactly. Great quote. And wow. For those of you that were wondering why I said I tried to get through 3 topics in the first hour, anything else to add to erasing teachers before we move on? Yes, no? Well, then let's drop into fences. And this one came from a live event yesterday. This amazing dude right here and I were kind of meandering around my property and noticed that the fence in the backyard, which is between our 2 properties, it had been damaged about 2 years ago by a tree falling down. And the neighbor fixed it before I could get a chance to fix it. And they kind of fixed it. I mean, it was kind of up, but it was up enough to where when the neighbor's horse decided that it was hungry for the leaves on the tree on the other side of the fence, the horse just had to lean in enough to grab another leaf and undid all the repair. And pretty soon that fence was starting to become a gaping hole, and the neighbor's animals had already found a few ways to get over to our yard. And in case you're wondering what's going on, we also have animals in here. This is Bo, and over here we got Bear. Yeah, so we're coming to you live with the whole family, the whole zoo, and the whole property tonight. But when I got to thinking about fences are designed to do 2 things. Keep things out, keep things in. What is the fence made of? How tall is it? Fences, walls, barriers, that's all a fence is a permeable barrier. And no, that's not me breathing. That's my excited, yes. But I also, it made me think about how many people have fences in their subconscious. What are you keeping out? What are you keeping in? What are you protecting yourself from? Are there any areas that need to be mended? I've had clients that after what they've gone through and without recognizing what the lesson was, they not only put up a fence. I had one client who, when we went in to see what was going on, they were inside a fortress of titanium walls that were 2 feet thick. No doors, no windows. When I asked how tall the walls were, they couldn't see because they were through the clouds. They were having a little bit of an issue with dating. And they were very attractive, very personable. By anybody looking at them, they would immediately think, boy, this person must be in a relationship all the time. In fact, I'm sure most people that they were looking for wouldn't approach them because they were so attractive that what's the use? I'm sure they're already taken. But because of what had happened, they had put up, not, like I say, not just fences, but impenetrable walls.
In that line, I don't necessarily know if it's always about the fence, because on a subconscious level, whether you believe in it or don't believe in it, we have energy. And sometimes when people put up those fences, they're not just the fence, they electrify that fence, so the energy is such so that people won't even approach them because they're repelled by it instantly.
Yeah, and thank you. My squirrels are going nuts right now because he is so spot on, because it carries over into triple P, protocol for dating. And I've told my clients about the phenomena that's coming up. Anyhow, and it's funny how many of them give me that look like, arr? And the phenomena I'm talking about is anybody that has gone through a dry spell with dating knows what it's like in that dry spell. You can't get a person to give you their phone number if you pay them, they give you a false number. And you search and search and search until you finally settle for somebody that actually paid attention to you because they're probably just as desperate as you are. Not that they're a match, just you matched on, we're both desperate. Oh my gosh, you're breathing and you looked at me. I'm looking at you. Do you see me? I see you. Oh my gosh, we should spend some time together. And sure enough, as soon as you find that person, your energy shifts and you're in a car at a stoplight and the person in the car next to you jumps out of their car, runs over and throws their phone number at you. And you're like, what the, where were you 2 weeks ago? The energy shift. I know. Do you know how I know? May or may not have happened to me a few times. Well,
That's you bring up a really good point, and one of them is with the triple P is once you've done the homework, once you've learned the lessons, once you've graduated from that, your energy has shifted, and you will attract a much higher level of person. Like if you're a king or a queen looking for your king or a queen, guess what energy you're putting out after the protocol? Before the protocol, you could be a king or a queen, and you're attracting a 3.
yes. Yes, absolutely. And I may or may not have dated a couple of 3s because of that. Holly.
Yeah, I just had a random thought. And I do think it's important to have a healthy fence and, whatever. But when you have the tower that's electrified, that's got several layers to it with no door anywhere, we think we're keeping out what's terrifying. And, are we also keeping out the good? But I'd never had this thought before. Are we also trapping in the trauma so it can't go out because it has nowhere to go out?
100%. That was the issue with my client. When we identified that not only were there no doors or windows, when they looked around, it was barren wasteland. Nothing grew there. And so I got them to completely redesign it, and they were able to, and good question, Mike, keeping out the help. That's where they were, I don't want to sound arrogant or whatever, but they were smart enough, lucky enough to reach out for help. They put out a help. I don't know if it was the bat call through into the clouds, or if they just cried hard enough to where they were able to reach out. But when I had them redesign, it's kind of a deal called mindscaping, where I had them redesign the terrain. Now they had a standard little picket fence with a gate, and I gave them the option, you can put whatever level of security you want at the gate. But we had things growing. I let them know that the water feature was from all of their tiers. Nothing got wasted. And down by the pond, I asked them, is there a place to sit? Yes. For how many? 3. Because they wanted to have a family. They wanted a kid. And lo and behold, they are now happily married with a child. And I'm not going to take credit, but it's one of my happy stories. And yes, part of it was recognizing the lessons, the teachers, the energy, and opening up the ability to let somebody else in. Yes, we got all sorts of changes tonight. Entertainment and everything. And that gives us 8 minis to get 3 in. Anybody got anything else they want to add to fences? Fences, barriers, all the above? Well, we're going to toss in one more feature. Goats. Anybody been around goats or had goats or taken care of goats? Know that they may be cute, especially when they're little. But they are some interesting little machines. They have the ability to eat things that will blow your mind. Yes, they are so cute until they're in your rose bushes, which they love. They have no problem with the thorns. And sometimes you got to kick them out, kind of like we're going to do the dogs here pretty soon, because they get to be a nuisance and a distraction. And the neighbors have goats, and watching those little animals, it made me realize
Way to keep it family themed.
yes, it made me realize what is the intrusive thoughts in our minds that have the ability to seem cute, like comments and jokes and things of that nature, but they have the ability to go in places that maybe we shouldn't let them in. And they have diets that we could never or would never tolerate. Like we've got these, I call them devil vine. They're a nasty, nasty vine that grows down here, and they are covered with thorns that break off as soon as they get in your skin. They break off, and trying to get those things out. And goats, love them. They're down there. That's why a lot of people will actually rent goats to clear their land. because they will go in and they will devour everything. So can you guys think of any examples of what kind of habits or, yes, discussion, yes.
I feel like you just opened up a whole huge discussion, especially because there's such a specific thing where if somebody that your significant other or somebody makes a comment and you happen to not like it, but you're also wanting to accept them as they are. People who make jokes all the time, or they're like, oh, I'm just joking, that's just what I do. I grew up in the family of I make fun of you because I love you. That's how you know I care. So it depends on, are you wanting to accept them and how personally are you taking it? Which is why I said you could really take up a whole huge discussion on this one.
Well, and because it's done in cuteness. Again, watching them little baby goats bounce around and headbutt each other. Ain't they cute?
They are so cute. I do agree
Yeah.
with this.
And then they go and they are able to go into places that they shouldn't be in. I know a guy that his neighbor had goats, and he had been working on his vehicle, had the hood up overnight, and the goats got out, and he woke up in the morning to find one of them under the hood eating the wiring. It had already destroyed the wiring harness. And I asked him, what did he serve the goat with? I'm thinking vegetables would probably be a good pairing, but they were cute.
They were.
And so we have to be careful what it is that we allow to run in our minds, out of our mouths, that's cute, but destructive. And sometimes them little things have to be fenced in.
As you're learning.
Especially after we learn the lesson that they can be destructive, hurtful, and because those cute little things found my wife's rose bushes, and one had only been in the ground for 4 days, and they turned it into bare twigs. And the other one had about, between the two of them next to each other, had about 2 dozen budding flowers. And they cleaned off all the buds, all the leaves, everything. Left twigs. And if we would have not found them earlier, or when we did, they may have left us with a root ball. So, again, back to comments and the ability, the things that we become comfortable with.
So I got a question for you, TJ.
Yeah.
So if you've got somebody who is doing something that, and it comes back to the fences too, that is doing something that they think is cute, or like Laura said, they think that's just the way I am. If I love you, then I'm gonna make fun of you, but it doesn't sit well with you. What is the, probably 3 methods to either curb that behavior before you either have to cut them out or decide what you're gonna do with that?
You know the best part about that question? We are right on the cusp of hour number 2, so I'm gonna ask Mark's patience while I do the conversion. Keep your hand up, Mark, because for those of you that are watching for the first time, this is the magical time when I switch over to hour number 2, and we have the ability to open mic, open platform. Anybody on the call can ask a question, bring up a topic, which is why I invite all of you watching, even if you're watching the recording, please join us live. You don't even have to know how to spell NLP. Join us, ask questions, and feel free to answer. So who's got an answer for that question? Yep. Did you want to ask the question again now that I've got everybody confessed?
Well, basically, the question was, when somebody is doing something that they think is cute and you find it offensive, and they may be doing it in fun, whatever it is, what are maybe say 3 methods that you could use to curb that behavior so it is more acceptable to you before you have to cut them loose?
Okay, who's got an answer? Mark.
I have a friend like that. He tends to use sarcasm as a well, it's obviously it's a self-defense mechanism, but he tends to be I tried various methodologies to deal with it, his sarcastic joking behavior. But the one I found that works best is whenever I become the butt of his comments, I just look at him and I say, "Yeah, I love you too, Mike." And immediately it dissolves, and he says, "Well, I only tease people that I truly care about." I said, "Yeah, I know." So it took me a couple of years to come up with that, but I tried confronting it, ended up knocking over yeah, you want to go, other things. But the one I found that works best is just, get past all the bravado and just go, "Yeah, I know, I love you too, Mike." And it just disarms them, so that's what I found that works.
Great answer. Who else has got something? Holly.
Got a couple things. So first of all, I kind of have mixed feelings on it because first of all, I think we can take this too far as well. Because sometimes somebody's tried to give us feedback and they give it more in a joking way, but it needs to be given, if that makes sense. So, for example, let's say you walk out of the bathroom and you've got toilet paper sticking out of the back of your pants or something. You don't want people to just ignore that. But if somebody comes up and teases you gently and, lets you know it's there and helps you take care of it, that might be the softer way to do it. And, it's just one of those, like, it would have been awkward no matter what was said. Or also there are situations, I think, that there might be somebody maybe who's a customer at work and you work in customer service. And this is somebody you're literally never going to see again. And maybe that's their attitude. So I guess my first thought on this is, I think this is a place where sometimes we do need to pick our battles. And there are some that we do need to pick. Don't get me wrong. But one of my first questions, so I believe that when we give people feedback, we earn the right to give people feedback. And part of that is having a certain rapport with them. So once again, if it's just some customer off the street, I may not have the level of rapport where it's appropriate for me to be giving them that feedback anyway. And once again, if you feel like it's your place, go for it. But so assuming that I do feel like this is something that needs to be addressed, and, then the first thing I do is, I try to use a lot of softeners. For those who don't know what the softeners are, just out of curiosity or so I can understand you better. So, if they say the first thing, you could say, I'm sure you probably meant this as gentle, playful ribbing, and then if you use a lot of I statements. So if you could say, but I have made it a goal right now in my life to surround myself with positivity. And that includes even when I'm being playful and when the people around me are being playful. And so, and then I think it kind of depends on the person. You kind of have to tailor it to them. I'd say the first time I might communicate the boundary. The second time I'm going to call them out on it. And then I will say, I will also communicate the consequence for violating the boundary. And so that consequence might just be, I know you might need to joke around or whatever, but because it's important to me to surround myself with positivity, if the jokes start going that way, just so you know, it's nothing personal, but I may need to leave the room for a few minutes. And then the next time they do it, you don't have to say a word. You just, walk out of the room. But once again, a lot of it's going to depend on how they're responding to you. Is this like a knee-jerk reaction? They've been doing it their whole lives. It's a prime thing. And can you tell they're trying to make an effort not to do it? Maybe I don't need to leave the room. Maybe it's just, hey, I'll give you a heads up. And then if you apologize, I'll stick around. But if you don't apologize, I'm going to leave the room. So I think a lot of it, so another thought that comes to my mind, for those who studied the Kuji, and we talk about Zen and this idea of enlightenment, and that when you're kind of vibrating at a higher level, sometimes people who, and this is not about ego or anything, but sometimes somebody who just hasn't had the same life experiences, they may not be ready to understand that higher truth. So I think a lot of it is tapping in and saying, this is about picking the battles again, but is this person going to be helped by me communicating this boundary and saying, please make this more positive? Or is this somebody who's vibrating at a level that they are not going to understand your intention behind that? They're never going to follow it anyway. And, is it a place that by trying to tell them the higher truth, you're casting proverbial pearls before swine, even just by having that conversation. So I think there's a lot of judgment in there, that there's definitely people that need to have that conversation. And you could decide too, how triggered are you by it? If it's really bothering you, I think you need to have the conversation. And maybe you need to decide certain people are not going to be, as we talk about the different layers of where they're allowed to be in your life, maybe they're barely allowed to even be on your castle grounds anymore, because maybe you don't take it personally. Maybe you don't, take it out on personally, but just say, you know what, this is something that I don't want in my life right now. You clearly are there. That's the way you want to be. Maybe if I'm stuck at a work party with you, or if you're a family member, if we're stuck at a family reunion, I'm going to, I know this is a battle I can't have because you're not ready to have that conversation. But outside of that, I'm going to minimize contact. So I think there's, you really have to tailor it to the person who's in front of you, and wondering what is best for me, what's going to bring out my highest good, and also what is best for them. Because sometimes if it's not bothering you too much, maybe having that positivity of your example is more important than having the conversation. So, but sometimes too, having the conversation is going to be hard, but it's the best thing you could possibly do because they really need to do it in their own life too. So, I think there's tailoring it to the person in front of you. But if you do decide to have the conversation, maybe keeping it lighthearted, softening a lot, but B, if they continue to do it, making sure you communicate the consequence for violating the boundary, and then making sure you follow through on the consequences for violating the boundary. But then once you do follow through, don't hold on to it. It's, I left that day, but tomorrow we're starting with a fresh page. And then we'll see if it happens again, and if we have to escalate, what the consequences are. Hopefully that makes sense.
Great answer.
Could I add something if you don't mind, TJ?
Yes, yeah.
I've experienced something a little differently lately, and I'm not trained like all of you brilliant people and NLP and stuff. So I was being triggered by something that my partner was saying, but when I went to tapping, my partner said, I shouldn't be able to make you feel anyway. And I really wanted to say, well, you are, so change it. And I might have had a couple of F-bombs in my mind that I didn't verbalize. And then I went to my tapping lady, and she actually said the exact same thing. And that comment alone was really triggering me. So when I repeated to her what my partner said to me, she said, how triggered are you? And I said a 10. So when we started doing tapping, which I didn't believe in initially, but very quickly that trigger I saw was really within me. And what my partner said really wasn't anything super triggering probably for a normal person, but it was super triggering for me, and it was a wound inside of me that I had to heal. So I could have just, my old me would have just deflected and blamed, probably said F off and left, and it would have all ended there. But it's very helpful if sometimes you can reflect on why is it triggering you.
Great answer. Lenore.
I completely second that. And that was actually something that I was going to say. If you find that it's bothering you, to take notice of it and start to look as to why is it bothering me? What else is coming up? Whether it's a friend saying, something on the fly, like, I know exactly how to get rid of you. One of my friends said that to me, and I lost it because in the world of hypnosis and NLP, we know the basic one of if you violate somebody's boundaries, if you violate something that's important to them, that's the fastest way to get rid of them. And that to me, like, sent me sailing. And then I did exactly what you did. I had to spend time with what else was going on, because what did it mean about me? And that took a little bit of revealing, but I found it to be also something, and you might have also noticed this, especially people when they reflect on themselves, that's also a good thing to then recognize, oh, it's because I wasn't speaking up for myself, or I had this thought that I wasn't, that were my greatest fear, that I wasn't valuable, that I was disposable, and that somebody could easily move me out of their life for that. That to me really shifted my thinking, because then I got to recognize, oh, I am valuable. And that also meant I could say positive things about myself without feeling arrogant. Anytime that I would say something positive, I was getting this feedback sting of, you shouldn't say that because that's arrogant. You're trying to stand out. You're trying to get attention, rather than being proud of a quality about myself. And I thought that was really, really interesting, and how quickly and easily as children we could take these lessons and just say, oh, if I'm saying something good about myself, I must be arrogant, or I must be stupid, or whatever you're filling in the blank. And we scoop them up and we take them with us in a basket, and we hang on to them for dear life until we start to really recognize that inner component of going, when did I decide this? And do I want to keep it? That I think is completely pivotal. The other thing I wanted to share was, if anybody's on Instagram or YouTube, there is someone by the name of Jefferson Fisher, and I know we've talked about him a lot on here. And he literally, the book is titled The Next Conversation, Argue Less and Talk More. It's a great book. He has such phenomenal insights on Instagram, and they're literally him in his car, and he's like, here's 3 ways to do this. Here's three ways to navigate this. And he's got some very, very good insights on how to navigate difficult conversations.
And I was gifted that book by an amazing person and got it over there. And yeah, there's a lot of awesome stuff in it. And while you guys were talking, one of my squirrels reminded me big time of when I was in school. One of my classmates, whose house I would go over to every now and then, their parents, when I first heard them talking to each other, my jaw literally hit the ground. I was like, did you just say that to her? Did you just say that to him? And what the squirrel brought that up was, I realized that my friend followed suit and went through a lot of really good-looking dude and charming, but the way he would talk to his girlfriend and stuff, and last I heard, I think he has been divorced like 3 times. Because, well, kids don't learn by what you tell them, they absorb. And so for him, it was just natural to say these things to your partner, because his parents probably came from that generation of stuff where you just stick together, no matter how horrible or
Morning. Can you hear
Morning.
me? So these days, I'm just really matter of fact with people. I'll just go right up to them and say, hey, I didn't like what you said. I don't appreciate it. Please don't do it again. And I don't say it in a mean way. I don't say it in an aggressive way. Just very matter of fact, very calm. But the thing I will acknowledge is it did take years, possibly even decades, for me to reach a point where I was able to just do that very calmly without losing my shit and getting angry or upset about the way they were talking or the things they were saying. I'm a little bit sensitive about my weight. A lot of people say I look fine. I'm all right. I'm quite a tall guy, so people say, I don't look too big, but I think I'm really fat, right? So sometimes if somebody makes a fat joke or a chunky joke or something like that, it really, really did for so long rub me the wrong way, and I would curse them internally, silently, or I would get built up and maybe not respond because I didn't want to be rude, but then something small would set me off and someone else would end up getting in the firing line who didn't even deserve it, who wasn't the person who pissed me off in the first place. And it took a lot of work and a lot of internal searching and lots of self-hypnosis and all the rest of it to kind of reach a point where I was like, you know what? Maybe they just don't know. Maybe they just have no idea, like what you were just saying. Maybe it's for them it's normal and they didn't mean anything by it and they just don't know. So I just walk up to people now. If they say something, I just very matter of fact, very not trying to be mean, not trying to, and just, hey, I didn't like what you just said. I would appreciate if you don't say things like that again. And that's it. Just turn around, walk away. And if they repeat, then I would go, the way, what Holly was saying earlier about defending the boundary and really then putting your foot down and saying, hey, what the hell? And it also depends on context a little bit. You know, is it a social setting? Is it a place of work? If it's a place of work, they're going to get in all sorts of trouble because you cannot harass co-workers and things like that, right? Or if you're a customer, you cannot harass the staff, right? Or that kind of thing. So it really does depend a little bit on context as to how far you can go with it or how much you can kind of, you know, turn to an authority and see if they could help you out, that this person is being mean or overstepping a boundary. But my first response is to just say it to them, because I used to really let it kind of penetrate my surface, and then, oh, if they're thinking that, maybe other people think that as well. And, you know, suddenly every time somebody rolls my eyes, I think they're thinking the same thing, that the mean person said that thing. So maybe this person's also thinking, and it was like a snowball rolling down the hill, getting worse and worse and worse, but only for me and only in my head, and no one else actually had a clue what was going on. So I think it's very important to speak up, right? As much as you might be scared, as much as it might be, you know, like like myself also, I don't like confrontation really, and you might feel that you can't always just go up to someone and say something like that without getting confrontational. But it's much more important to kind of burst that bubble and let the pressure out by saying something rather than staying silent and letting it build up inside, because that just makes it worse on so many different levels. So yeah, try speaking up, try saying something very matter of fact, don't get mean about it. And if they then re-offend or violate the boundary you've set, then do what Holly said and just let them have it, you know?
I'm just a little bit curious, Elijah. When you do that, what is the response that you get?
So most people, and it might be different over here, you know, in the UK it might be different, in America it might be different. Most people, when I say to someone, hey, I didn't like what you said, you know, it's a soft spot for me, or it's a trigger thing for me, I'd appreciate if you don't say that again. 9 times out of 10, the palms come up like this, the body goes back and says, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. 9 times out of 10, that's what happens. Very few people will be like, get over it, you know? Nobody will ever pick a fight with me. Like I said, I'm quite a tall guy, quite a big guy, stocky. Nobody picks fights with me. I have a shaved head. I can look very scary if I put a mean face on. So nobody ever picks a fight with me in my whole life. I'm 45 years old. Nobody has ever tried to pick a fight with me, right? So that's not something I could imagine. Like maybe if you're like a 5'3" lady or something, maybe it's different. Maybe somebody like, oh, they might respond more aggressively in that situation. But I'm a big guy, and when a big guy comes up to you and says, hey, I don't like what you said, right? Please don't do it again. 9 times out of 10, it's, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to offend you.
But actually, I think you brought up something very important. It's the energy. It doesn't matter if you're 5'1" or 6'5". The energy that you're approaching that with will determine. Because if you approach it with a very mousy energy, you're probably not going to get the same response that you're getting.
So that's what I'm saying. That's why, like, matter of fact. When I say matter of fact, I don't like it's. That's actually an emotion, or a vibe. It's very indifferent. It's very flat. It's not aggressive. It's not playful. It's not angry. It's not shy. It's not coy. It's not humorous. It's just a matter. It's like saying, hey, it's raining outside. It's just a fact. So you say it matter-of-factly. Hey, I didn't like what you said. Please don't say things like that again. That's it. It's just a fact. There's no emotion there. And that's what makes it work. Because if I come up to them aggressively, hey, you said that and that's really insulting, you shouldn't talk to people like that, then now I'm the aggressor. And if I go across mousy, right, that's an invitation to trample me. So I go very flat. Do you know what I mean? And that's kind of why it works, I think. You're right. It's very perceptive. Thank you.
Lenora.
I don't know if we've gotten on, if we've transitioned to still, like if it's a friend situation or if it's a significant other situation. For me, very specifically, early on in my relationship. So I've been married for 15 years. I've dated him for 17 years. And early on in the relationship, and yes, my personality has definitely changed and topics have definitely changed. If you let somebody say something early on, it's going to keep carrying. And at the time, it was more joking, it was more playful. It was like, oh yeah, Lenora can't take a joke. Like, I've been known to be a bit sensitive my entire life. We've gotten better. But as I've evolved, the conversations have had to evolve to the point where it might come to, unfortunately, it might come to a bit of a disagreement about it and a bit of a fight. And then it has to, it's now escalated, the impact is now there even more. So it's something that you want to be respectful of your significant other and really be aware of, oh, don't say that. But in a joking way, it might slip out and it might change topics and it might change hands. And that's also where that personal reflection has to come in and go, okay, do I need to take this personally? Do I need to take this on? Does this need to have another conversation? I find that my friends or colleagues or something, if they had said something like, oh, that wasn't the nicest thing, or like, oh, that was a little out of character. When it's in your closer relationships, sometimes they do need they do need to have a more aware and leveled up conversation other than just like, no, I didn't like that. That might not fly, especially if you're in a joking situation or if you're in a different type of tone of the situation. You will have to change the dynamics. And it's really that version of you. How do you want to approach it? So I've gotten much better. So I don't necessarily need to go from like 0 to 60 anymore. I've gotten better in being able to control my emotional state. That being said, I can separate things. And then if it's still really bothering me, there needs to go back and be a conversation about it.
Absolutely. Holly.
So first, I want to just really thank Elijah for reminding us that that matter of fact for establishing boundaries. I think that's so important to know that we can do that and that it can be very powerful. I was immediately thinking of when they talk about women when they're rejecting men who are interested in them. And I've heard this from Matthew Hussey. I've heard this from Dr. David Snyder, probably others too. But women so commonly, they start out way too nice. So the guy isn't getting the message. And then all of a sudden they escalate to 100 because the guy's not getting the message and they get really, really mean. And I think that matter of fact is kind of, it's that sweet spot of I'm giving you the message, but I'm not mad at you. You know, I'm not taking this personally. I'm going to assume best intent. I'm going to assume you didn't know my boundary and that's why you violated it. But there's going to be no question here what my boundary is. I'm not going to be so nice that it goes over your head or you think it doesn't matter. Or so I absolutely love that that option. One other thing that did pop into my head, if anybody's listening to this and if they say, you know, this is my default, this is how I interact and I can't go cold turkey on this. One of the thoughts, I don't know how many of you watch Charisma on Command. They actually did a video just on this topic. And one of the things they said is, first of all, it's really hard to get it right. And they just recommend you avoid this pattern if you possibly can. Another thing they said is definitely, if you can't, you know, if you have to do it sometimes, at least do it with people you know well and you know how they're going to respond. But they did say if you are going to do it, the number one thing you need to do is pick something that they are so strong on they can't possibly take it that you meant it seriously. So another thing I'd throw in there is don't ever do it for something that's a physical attribute, because even, for example, the most beautiful man, the most beautiful woman in the world might not realize they're the most beautiful man, the most beautiful woman in the world. So they still might take that personally. But TJ, if I could pick on you for a minute, if I were to say something like, gee, I don't know if TJ can figure out, how to plug in a microphone, like obviously there's no way TJ thinks he's so incompetent he could figure out how to plug in a microphone. So, if you are somebody that feels like, because sometimes, when we try to go cold turkey with a habit, it makes it worse. If you need to fill it in there, at least be strategic and kind about it and say it in a way that's intended as a compliment. So once again, make it so clear that the reason you're teasing them about it is because they couldn't possibly be sensitive about it because they're so ridiculously good at it that it couldn't possibly be an actual criticism. So hopefully that helps.
Kind of like you doing Excel sheets.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that I went through recently, so hopefully Morris doesn't mind me bringing him into this. So sometimes if I say something, or I'm listening to Morris and he might say something and then I'm doing a response, and he's thinking whatever's going on in his head, that I'm suggesting that he's stupid. And I literally stand there with my mouth hanging open, thinking, you are the most brilliant person I've ever met. That thought would never come to my mind, nor would those words ever come out of my mouth, because to be honest, I don't think people are stupid. I just think people know different things. So it's really interesting for me that that's his perception. So when I asked him about it, and I've seen this occur a couple of different times with not only me, but one other person, and he actually was told a lot when he was in school that he was stupid because he learns in a different way. And so then the flip side happened. And so if you said to me that I'm stupid, it wouldn't trigger me because I know I'm not stupid. You call me a lot of things, but stupid's not one word that would trigger me. But I've noticed with my weight, then if someone comments on that, that could really trigger me. So I think, again, it's different if someone's saying something and their intention is flat out to be mean. But I think a lot of the situations that I've witnessed, just from my own perspective, is that most people, that's not their intention, but they are hitting on a sensitivity that we have, and it takes an awful lot of energy to go after someone, even if it's your partner, or even if you go and stew in that energy. It's a lot of energy that you're putting into that. So I've learned in the last year or two that it's a lot healthier for me to take that energy and do self-reflection and see, first of all, what I could do about it to make myself whole. Because then you show up better for everybody.
Great answer. For a second there, I thought I was going to have to be the ringmaster. Fight!
I had a squirrel when Lenore was talking,
Squirrel!
and people are making comments. And what that squirrel was, is kind of another question. What happens if you're in that intimate space and that with that intimate person, and they're saying something, but they start now weaponizing things that you're sensitive to or you've had issues with in the past, and they start now, instead of dealing with whatever's going on, they start throwing all those barbs in. How do you react to that?
Been there, done that. Lenora.
Oh, I have experience with this. And one of the things, so when it was my significant other, I used to consider them like World War IIIs, and everybody's heard me like I've slammed a door and broken door frames. What I didn't understand was gaslighting and also manipulation. And TJ, what do you say? Spotlight effect, is that one of them?
Yep.
So there was a gaslight, like I used to be told that I was thinking about something. Now, this wasn't from my husband. This is from other areas that I've lived in. But I was told that I was going to be doing something, as in they were already anticipating that I was doing bad behavior, that I was their problem, that I was the worst person. And then on top of pointing the finger at me, then they would take my words and use them against me. So, for example, had I said something, and I'll talk about weight, had I said something like in the 90s, starting a diet was a thing. And I would say, oh, well, I'm going to start a diet. And the second I did not follow it to the T, I was getting verbally lashed as, you said you were going to be doing this. Why aren't you doing that? And like aggressive, harsh judgment coming at me. I didn't know how to handle it. Had no idea. Turns out I just pulled it in and just made it a part of my audio reel inside my head. When I notice that I'm doing that to myself and I'm getting that quick snap, it's something that I've really had to raise my awareness on. That being said, also, when it was in conversation, you know, how we just talked about kids growing up in environments where they have no idea. This is just the way that they talk. I didn't realize that that was one of the behaviors that I was also fighting against, because I didn't want to get in a conversation where I was bringing up all this past stuff to somebody, but I was getting into fights where people were doing it to me, and this was the only way I knew how to fight. What I realized after that was I needed to figure out how to fight. And when I started to get into NLP and hypnosis and really understand the mechanics of what's going on in a conversation, if you can understand this person is hurting and they think I'm the cause of all of their hurt and they're putting it on me rather than they're putting it in front of me. When I can see it out in front of me and I can say, okay, there's a lot going on here. Let me go at it one at a time, and having that state control and being able to raise my own awareness of it feels like it's about me, but it's really just at me. I was able to fight, as in have a conversation and hold my emotional state much, much better. And I was able to then de-escalate the disagreement, and we were able to figure things out, because I do think that there is an art to fighting. There is an art to disagreements, and taking somebody's vulnerabilities and harnessing them against them is definitely not my style. And it has been used heavily against me in my entire life. So I'm very attuned to it. I can hear it coming. And then I also know what to do about it. And it's just an ongoing level of raising that self-awareness of, after the end of the fight, how do I want to feel? Do I want to feel like I held my own? I held my state. And I'll do certain things, and I know we've talked about that in this group. Like, I will soften my tone. I will speak slower. I will stand up, and I will step away as far as I can to keep getting that distance, because certain people will not stop. And you have to be able to find a way to say, okay, I'm going to walk away. And I might go in the car and I might scream if that was on the phone with certain people if I needed to afterwards, just because it's an emotional charge. But in the fight, how do you want to respond? How do you want to act? What do you want to remember? What do you want to take away? And what do you want to learn from? Or it's going to keep repeating itself.
Great
I
answer.
went a lot of different directions.
Holly.
Such a good question. So as soon as I find somebody who is deliberately willing to use a trigger, an emotional button, whatever you want to call it, against me, and I can tell it's a deliberate decision, first of all, unless, I suppose if I did something to them first, which I don't think I would ever be in that category, but if I did something to them first and I could feel that it's, retaliatory because I escalated it there first, I might not do this. But in general, I immediately am throwing them into what I call the narcissist bin. And when I use this term, I know people are worried about it being used incorrectly. I'm using it the way Dr. Ramani uses it, for any of you who follow her. And she says there's two kinds of narcissists. There are those who actually qualify for narcissist personality disorder. And there are very few of them, because apparently they have to believe it causes them problems as one of the criteria. And in most cases, the people who are getting the problems are the people around the narcissist, not the narcissist themselves. And then there's also narcissist behavior patterns. Now, one of the most common, so gaslighting's high on that list, but another really common one is basically diagnosing somebody's triggers, their emotional buttons, and strategically weaponizing them. So one of the things you have to understand, and by the way, I have a lot of sympathy for people who are narcissists. I think that I feel bad for their lives. But the best thing you could possibly do for a narcissist, if you love them, is give them healthy boundaries and immediate consequences for actions, because otherwise you're just enabling bad behavior. You're rewarding bad behavior. But you have to remember, somebody like that thinks very differently than your normal person who actually cares about other people's feelings. They're seeing things as a strategy. And so things they say, they're not even personal. So, it's just, I threw 10 things at you. I watched how you reacted, and I found the 2 that hit. And then I, dove down a little bit more on those 2 and got a little bit more strategic. So one of my things is believe somebody when, and maybe they could show me they're not in that category. There are things they could probably do to show me this was a one-off, but I have yet to see it. Usually when somebody shows you who they are, believe who they are, and then realize that you are dealing with a different kind of strategy. You are not dealing with the strategy of I want to reach them. I want to connect with them. I want them to see my pain so they can understand what they're doing. No, it's I'm going to put you in a place where you can see that your behavior is not getting you the results that you want. That's all you could do that's helpful for them. That's all you could do that's loving for them. And it's also what you could do to protect yourself. Now, I will say, if you can cut that person completely out of your life, might be a good idea. But the other thing you have to recognize is being careful about, I think it's called triangulation. Recognize if that person's pushing your buttons for the sake of somebody else. So basically, in this scenario, you basically have, I call them the audience, the target, and then there's also like the NPCs. So I don't know what to do with the NPCs, the non-player characters, for those who don't know what that stands for.
Just put them outside.
But basically, what you have to remember is one of the patterns that people like that like to use, there might be some other person they're trying to impress, and they're trying to break up your relationship with that person. So what they're going to do is they're going to find something that bothers you to, like a level 7. So say you exploded an 8. They're going to find a level 7, and they're going to push you when the other person's not looking. Then they're going to push you again, and they're going to push you again. They're going to get you right to the edge. And then they're going to, in public, hit you with a 3. And you're going to explode because it was just enough to push you over the edge. But what happens is this other person in your life, somebody you care about, maybe it's a spouse, maybe it's a parent, maybe it's a sibling, maybe it's a coworker, whatever it may be, that person, all they saw was you get hit with a 3, and they say, yeah, that wasn't right, but boy, did you overreact, because they didn't see you getting hit with the 7, the 7, the 7, the 7, the 7. So if you are on that side and you could tell that somebody's playing that game on you, the best thing you could do is tattle as soon as you know what's happening. What you need is and like I said, I call them the audience or the authority figure, because sometimes it's just an audience, sometimes it's an authority figure. You need the person they're trying to, not see the 7s. You need that person to see every single 7. And what will happen usually is that person will be like, oh, I can't play my game. What do I do now? I'm not getting away with it. Now, the thing you could do if you're on the other side, say you are the authority figure or the audience. The number one question you need to ask yourself is, if somebody overreacts, ask yourself, is this consistent with who this person is, with the person that I know? And if the answer is no, trust your knowledge of the person more than what they did in that one moment. So anyway, I've been going on for a bit, but those are my thoughts on them, my 2 cents on the matter.
Great stuff. Mark.
That was brilliant, Holly. I had a few thoughts. One was circling all the way back to goats, TJ. Sometimes on the inside, we have these obstinate, ruminative, pernicious goats that we all carry around. And that can be, triggering self-doubt, but when you're dealing with a narcissist in a group situation, again, in what Holly called NPCs, I thought that's kind of analogous to what I was talking about last week of flying monkeys. Okay. And, you know, but, and, what Holly said about, again, dealing with narcissists. I was watching a Jordan Peterson podcast, and he said to disarm a narcissist, you have to, as Elijah said, just be very, come at them in a very even tone and go, according to Peterson, he said, I see you. I see what you're doing. And he says that will disarm a narcissist. It might cause them to escalate, in my opinion, but when you confront a narcissist and you go, I see you. I see what you're doing. He believes that will disarm the narcissist.
I think part of that response is, I think part of that response is going to be included with stature and energy. Just like Elijah, me being 6'4", especially then this big dude over here covered with tats, we have a certain ability with people that we're not attached to, if they want to pull that stuff, to be able to simply give them that look and generate that energy. And I've had a few people try and push me around verbally, and I just simply reminded them, I know how to play the game. You want to hear some stuff? And I rattle off some stuff just like that, and I went, I just choose not to. It's a choice. And that was another one where people were like, I said, yes, it's a choice. In fact, I had a quick story here. My sister tried to set me up with a very attractive coworker, which I was all for, because that was back in my days of wanting to meet very attractive women. And we all met at this restaurant type / bar type place. And even my father was there. And this lady was absolutely super attractive until she opened her mouth. And she had the ability to swear like a sailor on a 4-day pass. And I just went, wow, how sad. And I didn't say anything because I didn't want to embarrass her in front of everybody. But I went to the bathroom, came out, and was picking out songs on the jukebox, because even back then I knew which songs to play. And she came up and she was looking, and I looked at her and I said, you are so attractive. And she was like, oh, and I said, but the words that you say erase a lot of it. And it really makes me sad, because I can see you're intelligent and you probably don't need to use those words. And she turned white, went into the bathroom, and when she came out, she could hardly compose a sentence at all. And finally she just got up and left, and my sister's like, what did you say to her? I just told her that she was very attractive, but her language took away from it. Well, what'd you do that for? I went, because somebody had to. She was too attractive to not have somebody point out that she didn't have to do something like that. That activity, that trait was not endearing, and would probably, I never kept track of her, but I was hoping that she didn't end up with the kind of person that would find that appealing, because I've been around those type of people. And so sometimes they may not recognize what they're doing, and we may be the solution. I don't know. And boy, did that topic put in some time. Who else has got anything you want to add? Let's hear it for goats. Anybody else, or do we have
Great
one more?
topic.
Do we? Wasn't it last week? Didn't we have a topic that closed out the last 5 minutes that could have taken up an hour?
I know I had asked the lovely Fran question.
Channeling.
Yeah. Reg-
Fran
So,
said,
so
we
this
have
week
10
you give it
minutes,
10
Fran.
minutes instead of 5, right?
yeah. Fran shows up. She goes, "I've been studying for this all week, and now you guys are talking about goats."
I always manage to throw in a 1 hour topic in the last 3 minutes of the session. So
You do that quite well, Fran. It's like seeding for the next week.
Well, that just means I have to fill out this sheet in advance. Next week, we're going to be starting with channeling, which I know nothing about. So it'll be 3 topics, and then it'll be whenever
Fran's
Fran
hour.
shows up, we're dropping everything. We're going right into channeling. Mark.
I got one of those topics that probably is a can of worms to, we could start on it, but question occurred to me, a few people have ever worked with, when people come in and they present with a, kind of a bizarre reality, they, and do you work with the metaphors? Like if somebody comes in and like, I'm possessed by demons, or something of that ilk. Do you work with the metaphor? Or do you, because everybody else just reject, there's no such thing as, demons, and they get rejected, but it's their metaphor for what's going on in their life. And do you, and you want to get rapport, so, do you ever work with the metaphor? Do you ever, again, you're not feeding into their delusional architecture, but you can, once you've, not rejected them and gotten a rapport going, you can say, well, maybe you can call it a demon, or you can just call it, maybe some, negative energy that you've been carrying around for a long time, and you quantified it as a demon, But I was just curious if you folks are, I said, do you work with the metaphors that, people bring to you? Or do you, like I said, that's, because I know I have on a couple occasions worked with the metaphor that people present. And like I said, it's not a good topic to voice it, question at this point, but, but once again, we got another,
How did it work for you when you worked with the metaphor that they presented?
Well, I tried to relate to them. Yeah, it worked really well because I was able to, once I got the rapport going with them, I said, well, maybe you want to think about it, maybe not as a demon, but as, just some negative energy that, that you've been carrying around for, and it has been tormenting you, but it wasn't an outside agency, and they were able to make the shift to, as like I said, and you just have to, I think you just have to, again, you have to give them, I think, acceptance, that they're, I get you struggling with this and, but, maybe, talk about it, and how these demons have affected them, throughout their life and and how it's sabotaged, then you slowly, gradually, I think about it like a roller coaster, Elijah, the old roller coasters with the, with all the timber and it was all made out of wood, and I think about it like, every time we met, maybe I'd kick one of the slats out, as far as working with that person,
Is it
I
important to do that? To kick them
well,
out?
because you kick out enough slats and then the delusional architecture collapses on itself, you know.
But is
But
it
at
a
the same time,
delusion?
give them
Or is
another.
that just the way you're seeing it?
Well, again, I don't, it's the way that, I found, like I said, I thought it would be, like I said, they're walking around with this delusional architecture and, and, but I try to give them something a little bit more functional, and if
Yeah,
they,
but by functional, by whose definition?
well, I mean, it's, again, it's, again, I guess by mine, but
Right.
again, it wasn't serving them to continue, to walk around in this, you know, uh,
Hmm.
this state. So,
Right.
um,
They
you
did
know,
come to see you for a
they
reason.
were right. They did come to see me to feel better, to get, so I tried to give them alternative ways to look at things, which I think we all do,
Okay.
but I was just wondering, when you
So
encounter something like that, do you work with the metaphor they present you, or,
Oh,
or how do
so
you go
my
about
answer will be sometimes. Um I will almost never reject it immediately because I think it's important to meet people where they are. I think it's important for me to be the more flexible party and go to meet them where they are rather than expecting them to even come like halfway or something like that. Right? It's on me to meet them where they're at because just purely for the rapport, right? If you start telling people they're wrong in any level of capacity, then you will just break rapport, and that doesn't serve you as the coach nor them as the client. My first question to almost anybody, and like maybe half or more of the people here have seen me working, no matter what the problem is, and somebody says, "Oh, I'm possessed by demons," or "Oh, I'm really anxious," or "Oh, I'm, whatever, I have a fear of heights." My first question, literally every time, is, "How do you know that?" Right? And really, what I'm trying to do is figure out what is the internal evidence that they are using to support the statement that they just made. Right? How do you know you're possessed by demons? Right? Because that's where the dispelling, if there is any dispelling to happen. So maybe I don't need to get them to or suggest a different phrase or set of words to replace the way they're wording it, but rather if I could get to find out what it is that's supporting that underneath and kind of knock that out in a way, maybe without them even knowing, or reframe that, then the conclusion that they reach themselves will be a different one from the one they had been reaching up until this point, and therefore they would then change the way they phrase it themselves, which I would consider to be more powerful rather than me telling them this is the answer. Because they will always, what is it, TJ? They won't believe what you tell them, they will believe what they themselves conclude.
Yes, exactly.
Right? So I will
it?
lead
This is what you tell
them
them,
to
not what they conclude.
conclude something else without telling them. So
Great answer
sometimes
to-
that means
great
entertaining
topic.
their metaphor. Sometimes, yeah, that means entertaining their metaphor, using their word, but not always. It's a tricky one. I would need specific context to know. It's hard to answer in theory.
Quick question. Holly, can you fit your answer into a couple of minutes?
I was just wondering about that. Probably, I'll just say I second what Elijah said. I always go with their metaphor because it was internally generated. just as an example, if they say I have a knife through my heart, is it more powerful to say, well, what if it wasn't a knife? Or is it more powerful to just say, okay, what if you pulled it out? So just throwing that out there, that you have to figure out what that metaphor means for them. But I always find it to be more powerful to work within their metaphors rather than forcing them to reframe it to my metaphors.
Great answer. And it looked like Miss Fran was about to add to it. She's like, no, kind of like being at an auction. Like, were you bidding? No, 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 no. Well, here we are at the top of the second hour. And I was going to throw in there, I actually have a t-shirt that says Metaphor Man. Because I have been blessed for most of my life, without knowing it, with the ability to talk in metaphors which help people to understand things quicker and better. And if you can get really good at talking in metaphors, you'll quickly realize that even the vast majority of my topics are metaphors. Tonight we covered erasing teachers and fences and goats. And they're all metaphors for parts of the human condition and how we can help each other and improve. And that's just what I want for you guys. I want to be able to help people live a happier, better life without all the schmutz from the past. And I just want to say again, thank you guys for being here, for supporting this platform, for offering up your precious commodity of time, because I will always say it, I haven't figured out how to reproduce it and give it back. As soon as I do, you guys will be the second to know. I love you all. Please go out and have an amazing, amazing week. And I hope to see your smiling faces back here in 7 lovely days. Until then, love ya. Oh, wait a minute. For all of you on YouTube, love you, Mom. See you guys.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, TJ. Bye.